Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production. Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Today's guest is Denise Gruzensky, and today's episode, how one nurse's love of animals inspired her to be a children's book author. Nurses, are you burnt out, frustrated, looking for something new? Are you looking for more? Nurses, are you ready to feel the sun? You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Your nursing license is your key to freedom. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at the nursesharkacademy.biz today. Hello and welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining the confidence, skills, and freedom to live your life on your own terms. You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Join us and support these wonderful nurse entrepreneurs and leaders. Today's guest is Denise Gruzensky, and she is out of Kerrville, Texas, and her business is D&D Mountain to Sea, and this is so exciting. She is a published author, a legal nurse consultant, family nurse practitioner, and all-around a nurse extraordinaire. Welcome to the show, Denise.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina. I'm happy to be here.
Well, as we always like to start off our questions, what made you become a nurse? How did you get into nursing?
I'll be honest, I actually didn't think I wanted to be a nurse. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Tina, okay, I apologize. When I was in about sixth grade, my father had said, why don't you become a nurse? My mom's a nurse. My dad's a respiratory therapist. He said, you can move anywhere you want to be. And my thought was, well, why can't anybody else? Why can't I just move wherever I want to be with whatever I want to do? But when I was a senior in high school, I applied to nursing school at the same time I was applying for college and got accepted my freshman year of college into the two-year nursing program in California. And I felt like, okay, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do, but still anticipated becoming an attorney, which is what I thought I wanted to be at the time, or a writer, which is also what I thought I wanted to be at the time, but that I would get my two-year nursing degree and go on from there. And approximately my second semester in nursing school, I was like, okay, I love it. I'm going to keep doing this, and ended up with my master's in nursing, where I'm now a nurse practitioner. I graduated from nursing school in 1994 and with my nurse practitioner in 1999.
So tell me, what was your first job as a nurse out of school?
My first job as a nurse was in a cardiac unit in San Diego, California, down in Chula Vista. It wasn't a primary open heart surgery type hospital. It was a smaller hospital, but it was a cardiac unit. And I remember having a mentor, a wonderful mentor. I still remember her name was Ruth, which we all know when we get out of nursing school, if you've been in nursing school and you've been out of it, that there is that phrase where we eat our young. But Ruth was just amazing. And every step of the way was just wonderful to work with, and just a wonderful mentor. I ended up with a latex allergy there in the early 90s and ended up having to leave that job for a facility that was primarily latex free, which was pretty new in the early 90s.
I do remember that, the whole changing to latex free that happened in the 90s. It was a really big deal, as a person who's also has a latex allergy. Oh. And discovered that working in the nursing home, and I had to get a doctor's note for me to get vinyl gloves with no powder. And I had to keep my gloves in my locker because they were so expensive. No one else could use them but me.
Oh my goodness. Well, and it's interesting that you say that because I was in my early 20s when I graduated. So I'll never forget. So I had had a rash from the gloves in nursing school. So I had stopped wearing latex gloves. And when I started this evening shift, I remember getting migraine headaches, slowly starting to not be able to see very well throughout my shift. And finally was told, you need to go. It was months after I started, you need to go down and see employee health. And I'll never forget it. It actually has changed some of what I, even as a nurse, because I really think about the person I saw in employee health stepped out the door and got on the phone after talking to me and said, I heard him say, you need to take her off the schedule indefinitely. And I'm not sure when she's coming back.
Wow.
And I was a brand new grad. And I thought, is my career over before I've even really started?
Oh gosh, I can imagine. I had got a piece. I used to, what I would do is this little trick is I would take the gloves off, wash them out, right, and get all the talc off of them because back then they all had talcum powder.
Right.
Well, and I would flip them inside out so I wouldn't itch as much. I mean, my hands would crack open and bleed. And I did that, and I got some of the talc in my eye, with the latex, and my eyes swelled shut for about a week.
Oh,
And that's when I
no.
went to the doctor and got the doctor's note. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah, and so that's how I discovered I had a
Wow.
latex allergy. My eye just, I'll never forget. I couldn't see out of one eye, and it was bad. It was so bad. And of course, they think you got pink eye, so they won't let you work. So it was very nerve wracking.
Well, and in the back of your head, you're thinking, especially in the early 90s, you're thinking, am I ever working again? Because latex free wasn't really a thing.
No,
In fact, I ended up getting I got lucky because I got a blood test done and my RAST test was negative for a latex allergy. And the workman comp doctor said, I don't believe this test. I think you're allergic to latex. And sent me to the one doctor in San Diego that was working on the skin testing for latex, but he was on the research group for that. I mean, that's how I'm just so lucky that the workman comp doctor went, no, I don't think this is right. Let me send you to this specialist.
I think that's awesome because I've seen workman's comp doctors are just kind of like, yeah, it says it's negative. Go back to work, So,
and they could have easily done that very easily because I've seen that too.
Yeah. So kudos to that doctor. Now, you mentioned that you had a mentor named Ruth. And I kind of share with us a little bit why she stuck out to you and what made her such a great mentor.
I remember her just being so kind. You're a new nurse, and any of us in the nursing field that have been here for any length of time, you could be a new grad that just started a couple of months ago. You realize how much you don't learn in nursing school that you learn outside of nursing school. So how green you are when you get in, and it's hard. There's so much you don't know. And there were other nurses that actually would use that against you and would be unkind, maybe even be mean, be condescending, not be willing to help you figure it out. And Ruth was just always there by my side, helping me out. I didn't really speak Spanish. We had a lot of Spanish speaking patients, and she helped me. She helped me with all of that as well. She was just so kind. And there was actually an investigation on the unit at one point. And it could have, she was just so good to me because that was very scary for me at the time. Again, I was a new nurse. I was a new grad. And it really ended up having nothing to do with me, but it was very frightening. And she stood right by my side and was, again, just really kind.
That's wonderful. We need more nurses like Ruth. And I know the power of good mentorship, and I've had some excellent mentors in my career. I've had some detractors too. We won't mention them, but I've had some wonderful mentors that have really helped me along the way and are still being an influence in my life today. So it's been great to get to know them. Now, you said you worked in cardiac, and I'm looking here at your bio here, and you also worked An emergency room, cruise lines, the Indian Health Service. Tell me a little bit about that.
So when I got out of nurse practitioning school, when I graduated in 99, I was finding it pretty tough to find a job. I sent out resumes. I believe I looked up in the yellow pages, for those of us that I'm dating myself here, the yellow pages, but looked up primary care offices in San Diego and sent my resume literally by mail to all of them. And I just couldn't find work. And so I got a call from a graduate that was a year ahead of me in NP school. And she was like, I worked for Carnival Cruise Lines last fall during the holidays to help cover some stuff. I now have a full-time job. They were asking me if I was wanting to come back out, and I can't. I now have the full-time job, but are you interested? And so that led me to, over the Millennium New Year's, I did my first 3-week contract with Carnival Cruise Lines as a nurse on board ships.
Oh, wow. Now, how fun was that? I mean, obviously you have sick passengers and things to deal with, but where did you get to go visit?
Well, we worked hard and we played hard. And that 3-week contract turned into being the first nurse practitioner that worked for Carnival Cruise Lines. So I actually ended up spending a total of 5 years with Carnival Cruise Lines through 2005 as a nurse practitioner. Okay. And I'll tell you, over the course of the 5 years, a lot of what I'd ever seen come into emergency rooms, we've seen come in there. So we had all of the things like heart attacks and strokes, and we were primary care for 1,000 crew members and urgent care / emergency care for 2,500 guests. So there were quite a few potential patients, but around that work came meeting friends from all over the world, meeting nurses and doctors from all over the world. That is fascinating to get to sit down and talk about how healthcare is different in each of your countries. And then my favorite is Alaska, but I've been to Alaska. I took out a brand new ship out of Finland. So I've been around Europe, the Caribbean, up the East Coast into Canada, of the US and Canada, and then down over to Bermuda. I've been all over the place in the 5 years I worked for them.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. So those of you that are listening, if you're nurse practitioners or nurses and you're interested in the cruise life, look up cruise ships. And that's another, I think to me, that's kind of entrepreneurial, even though you're working for the cruise line, that's entrepreneurial to go and do that type of work because you're not locked into one place. You could literally be anywhere in the world. And that might be a good way to see the world too. So not just in the military, but you could join the cruise ship. That's always been my dream, to retire and live on a cruise ship. So there we go.
Well, and we spent 6 months on and had 3 months off. So then I traveled with my 3 months off. And, people that I met on the cruise ship, when I went to Australia and New Zealand, I had probably a week of free lodging just based on the friends from the cruise ship who went, oh, go stay with my parents, or, oh, go stay with my friends over here. And so just linking you up to other people. I have friends all over the world now at this point, and it's amazing.
It's great. And then I see here you were also with the Indian Health Services. How did that come about?
So I got off of cruise ships and I lived in Miami Beach for a couple of years. And then I had a friend who said, you're not really liking the Miami Beach summers anyway. I'm not a humidity girl, even though I live in Kerrville, Texas at the moment, and it's a little humid. And she's like, my husband's in nurse anesthetist school. I'm taking a travel contract up here in Rhode Island. There's a long story around when I signed off the cruise ships. I was going to have a nurse practitioner job in Miami Beach. And that ended up not working out. And so I was continuing to work as a nurse. So I spent a lot of my early on nurse practitioner career kind of doing a dual role, going back and forth between them. And she's like, come up to Rhode Island. You can ride my coattails as a travel contract up here in Rhode Island. So I ended up in Rhode Island and loved it and stayed there. So actually moved from Miami Beach to Rhode Island and couldn't quite make ends meet between the traveling contract. There's a lot of things that goes into that. I should have stayed. There's a lot of coulda, shoulda, wouldas, which I try to not shoulda things because everything works out the way it's supposed to. But I went from the housing in the apartment to renting a house, and that ended up being really expensive. So I ended up doing multiple jobs. I worked for community colleges of Rhode Island and taught human sexuality. I worked as a nurse practitioner in the emergency room in the rapid care that I had been working at, that I had taken a travel contract in. And then I worked part-time through Indian Health Services for the Narragansett Indian tribe there in Rhode Island.
Okay. You know what? And that's important for us to think about, because sometimes we add on extra things to either make ends meet or get extra experiences or whatever. And that's okay, because look at what experiences you're able to pull from now currently in your business. And that independent spirit is just definitely coming through here. I myself had, not quite to that extent, but have worked several jobs and had at one time 5 jobs. I don't recommend that, but I had one job doing primary care in the nursing homes, and the other job was doing mental health care in the nursing homes. And then I also was doing hospice care, and then assistant medical director for a home care agency. And then I worked and started my own business with my partners in a CNA training school at the same time.
Wow. I'm exhausted just hearing it all.
It was very exhausting. Now, the hospice was PRN, and so was the home care and all of that. But I worked 4 days a week in primary care. I had 1 day a week I worked in mental health care. And it's because I got 2 job offers at the same time. And I thought, I'm never going to be in that position to where I only have 1 job. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to have something to fall back on. And they really needed me in this mental health job at the time. They were so short-staffed, and I didn't want to leave them in a lurch, so I took both jobs. And then when I took those jobs, it kept adding on, because my medical director was also the director of the home care and the director of the hospice. And he's like, hey, I need some help with this too. So that's how that happened. But I look back on that, and I'm grateful, because it gave me a wealth of experience, as you have a wealth of experience as well.
That's correct. Yep.
So right now, it looks like going forward, you're written a book. You're a legal nurse consultant. How did you go from, doing your 9 to 5, working for others, and then coming in and being an entrepreneur?
So it's another thing I feel very grateful for the experience, though I don't know at the time I would have called it grateful. So when I was in Miami Beach, I rescued a Yorkshire Terrier named Harley. And by the time I moved back to California, so that's 2008, 2009, he got diagnosed with diabetes. And it really spiraled me into a new area. I don't know if you'd call it a tornado that moved me into the area. But, at first I was completely devastated. He also lost a lot of his vision within the first few months. But in the midst of all of that trauma, I remember hearing from the vet, there are so many times that owners don't know the signs and symptoms to look for in a pet to know about diabetes. And so by the time they find out that their pet's diagnosed with diabetes, they're in, end stage organ failure. They can't be saved. So, because they're that sick. So I had called him because I had said, look, Harley is drinking more water than usual. He's eating more than usual. And he's having accidents inside the house, and he's been potty trained since I rescued him. In a human, I'd be looking at diabetes. What am I looking at in a dog? And it was diabetes. Wow. And so that really, when I was able to get through the initial pieces of that, and they were very good to me. They were, talking me through it, saying, this is something very treatable the same way it is for humans. But I really ended up diving into nutrition for animals and they get treated with insulin. That was insulin I got from the same pharmacy I prescribed medicine for my patients at. And so I really dove into all of that, but it always stuck with me that it was, what if you didn't know? What if you didn't have the knowledge that I had? And so when Harley passed away in 2013, my mom actually said to me, "You loved to write. Why don't you write?" And it was supposed to be just this cathartic, help me get through this dog of my heart that, I had lost a piece of me. But I didn't want the book to be sad. And so Harley's story came out of that. And people would read it and say, where can I get a copy of that? Where can I share that with somebody? And so I finally decided to go ahead and self-publish it. And so Harley tells his own story about being rescued, about finding out he had diabetes, finding out about other pets with special needs, and then learning about unconditional love. And so that was where the authorship was born.
I've read the book, and so if anybody's interested, let me tell you, it's a good book to get to share with your kids. And maybe if you have a kid that has special needs, maybe they can find themselves in Harley's story. As I was reading it, it reminded me of a young man that I known since he was a little kid. And I remember when he first got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And he was just, he was the typical rambunctious kid, always moving and groovy, but he felt horrible. He ended up losing a lot of weight. He was in and out of the children's hospital. And his mom said one day, why do I have to be different from everybody else? He went through the whole gamut of insulin pumps and everything. And so I think if I had a book like that to help him when he was younger, he's now a teenager and almost graduating from high school now. But if I'd had that book to help him when he was younger, I think it would have really given him some insight into, yes, it's okay to be different. So I appreciate your book.
Thank you. And that has been I've had a couple of surprise factors with it. One of them was when I took it to, I actually went to a juvenile diabetes charity walk, and kids that would just come up and say, "You mean dogs can have this too? You mean I'm not alone?" Like, just that idea of being a child and not being alone, and
Yes.
knowing that even an animal can have the same thing, right? You didn't do anything wrong to end up with diabetes, and you're not alone. And then a piece I never anticipated was my husband and I adopted a sibling set back in 2018. And when they first looked at it, the rescue part of the story really ended up being a standout that I hadn't even really thought about, with the rescuing of it and how much that connected my own kids to this dog as well. So my special dog that gets to stay with me after writing about him.
So he is already a hero, and he has a legacy that lives on.
Yes.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about your LNC work. I know it says you've been doing this for about 6 years.
Yes. So I have a friend whose husband called me whenever, I can't remember the date I started, but whenever I started was my friend's husband gave me a call and said that he had a case he was working on, that he worked as a legal nurse consultant. And I'd actually never heard of a legal nurse consultant at the time. And so I was fascinated by it, because go back to when I was in 6th grade and in high school and thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I was like, wow. So maybe I can do a little bit of that along with my nursing. And so that's how I ended up finding out about legal nurse consulting, and then have gone on and, read Pat Iyer's books. And I can't get my hours because I still work as a nurse practitioner in an internal medicine practice. So I don't do enough hours as an LNC to really get my certification completed for that. But I do really enjoy doing legal nurse consulting and looking at all of the aspects of it. I've become a better nurse practitioner. I can tell you my documentation has become better over the years of working as an LNC.
I happen to agree with that. My documentation has gotten a lot better because I look for. I try to remember the things that we should say and document, and think, okay, if 2 to 3 years later someone's going to ask me about this entry, am I going to remember the details? Right.
Exactly.
So that's what I do when I teach my documentation courses. I'm like, hey, you need to remember that 2 to 3 years, 5 years, 7 years from now, you may not remember everything about this patient, but if it's documented, then you've got yourself covered.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and so let's see here. I was just looking to see. So you've have you gotten new animals and pets? Because it sounds like you really love pets in your life.
I do. And actually, my website started out as a dog blog because there was just so much crossover with health and wellness. So, our next rescue was named Shasta, and he ended up with Cushing's disease and arthritis. So, here I am back diving deep into areas. I mean, typically, I'm referring a patient out for a specialist, I'm not trying to manage them. But I learned a lot in managing my animals. And so, he ended up with arthritis and Cushing's disease. And our rescue currently we got just after the kids moved in. So they had called me and offered me a puppy. And I was like, I can't do a puppy. And at the time they were 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm like, I can't do a puppy and a 1, 2, 3, and 4 year old. But it turns out the mom also needed a home. And so we brought her in. So she's been with us since 2018. Her name is Sierra. And at the moment, she doesn't have any health issues but special needs rescues specifically in older dogs are at the core of my heart. So I started out, my blog was called Denise's Dog Dish. And now I'm just Denise Gruzensky, and we're dishing all things dogs and family.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, as I know that you're very busy in your practice and all the things that you're doing, if you had one piece of advice for a budding entrepreneur, what would it be?
I think my bit of advice is don't be afraid of something new. Um, and don't be afraid if it doesn't work. There might be something else around the corner. So, it doesn't, none of the things like when I worked for Narragansett Indian Health Center, when I moved back to California, that ended and I didn't end up working for Indian Health Services again. That's not a failure. It's another experience. I worked, I actually didn't go into the story, but part of what happened when I came off of cruise ships was because I had been offered a nurse practitioner position in the emergency room there in Miami. And it turned out that, but the medical director said, come in, work as a nurse to start off with, and then we'll get you, as we get you credentialed in the state, then we'll have you transition into that role. And as we worked on that, he ended up not being the medical director in that place anymore. And the new medical director ended up saying, I don't want somebody that was previously a nurse to work in the same area as a nurse practitioner. I feel that's confusing for the other staff that you're working with. And so here I had signed off of cruise ships. I had moved to Miami Beach with this idea that I had a job. But you know what? Every single step of that led to something else. And so you may not see it at the time, but even something that feels like it didn't work out can still work out to be something that's amazing for you.
Sometimes those closed doors lead to bigger opportunities. Um, when I first became a nurse practitioner, I was offered a job as an NP in a mental health center in the town, where I had previously worked. I thought this was great. I knew some of the staff that were there. I used to be a nurse on the floor with them, and this was their first time having an NP. And I could not get them to correctly fill out the collaborative practice agreement. And when I kept saying the state says you have to have this certain formatted this certain way, I got pushback from the practice managers. Well, you're just too pushy. I'm not being pushy. I can't get credentialed or get my license until you do this correctly. And
right. This is the law. This isn't me being pushy.
Yeah. I was like, would you like to talk to the lady at the state? I mean, it was just a little thing about some clause about how often he was going to review charts and a phone number to be reached or something silly like that. So I go in and I was working as a nurse educator at the hospital, at the addictions hospital. And I go talk to the medical director, and I'm just really upset and about in tears. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll sign your collaborative practice agreement. You come work for me. So that's how I turned down that job working for them and ended up working for this addictions hospital. And that was my first NP job. And then I was in private practice. But full circle, years later, I come back and not that particular mental health center, but I'm working currently for another mental health center. And it's working out well. And so I say that, maybe sometimes it's not the right timing. Maybe you dodged a bullet because, people change, and that might have been the worst boss you ever had if you stayed. You
Right.
just never know. So sometimes those closed doors open up new opportunities. So you are so right. Well, you have a gift for our listeners. And so you say for the first listener that contacts me, email the show at the nursesharkshow@baxterprofessionalservices.com or the nursesharkacademy.biz. You can email us either way. You'll give away a free book and you'll
Correct. Yes.
So if they contact me, the first person that contacts me and asks for the book when you hear this podcast episode, let me know and I will make sure that I get your information so Denise can send you the book. And I want to thank you for that.
Of course. And it'll be an autographed copy. So it won't be the same copy you would buy on Amazon. We'll get you an autographed copy.
Yes, you'll have an autographed copy for you. And I will also put in the link for those of you who are, missed that opportunity. You could also pick up the book from Amazon. And so I'll have that link in the show notes for you. All right. So if one of our listeners wanted to get a hold of you, like for instance, maybe an attorney that may be listening, or another nurse that has questions about being an author, how may they contact you?
So my website is denisegruzinski.com. So DENISE. I guess it's probably on the screen too if you're watching. Gruzensky, GRUZEN as in Nancy, SKY.com. And that's also denisegruzinski@gmail.com. So either way is a good way to contact me.
All right. And then we'll also post all of our social media links as well. Will be in the show notes and available to you. I want to thank you for your time today. Did you have any parting words before we sign off?
I am just so grateful to have been here. Thank you, Tina. It is awesome to meet other nurse entrepreneurs. It's fun to listen to your other entrepreneurs on your website too. Thank you for providing such a wonderful resource.
It is my pleasure. And thank you for being a wonderful guest. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in again to the Nurse Shark Academy show. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like, and ring that notification bell so you know every time that we post a new episode. You can also find our episodes for our audio on Podbean or wherever you get your episodes, Apple, Spotify, etc. I want to thank you again, and don't forget to tune in. You can also find us on our website, the nursesharkacademy.biz. And I'll see you next time. My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining confidence, skills, and freedom to live your life on your own terms. I specialize in working with nurses and other health professionals who want to reduce burnout, pessimism, and compassion fatigue. So you can become a successful entrepreneur to reclaim the love you have for your profession and to create a fulfilling and prosperous life. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at the nursesharkacademy.biz and come feel the sun, providing a clear path for business success. Thank you for listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the nursesharkacademy.biz.